On the opening day of the UN General Assembly's top-level meeting in New York, the Secretary General had some tough words for world leaders. The head of the United Nations says countries aren't ready or willing to tackle the major challenges that threaten the future of humanity and the fate of the planet. But the UN chief says there is still hope if nations work as one through cooperation and dialogue. This comes as world leaders hear from international advocates and politicians on the most pressing issues facing the world currently. Well, joining us now to tell us more about Canada's position at the 77th UN General Assembly is the Honourable Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador Rae, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
So a lot of things are expected to be discussed at today's meeting. What are you hoping to come out of this meeting following a year full of international crises, war, and more?
Well, I think I have to give your viewers and listeners a sense of the dynamics of this week. You have 150 leaders of countries. You have 193 countries that are represented. You have many, many civil society organizations, NGOs from around the world, all coming together, all descending on New York at exactly the same time in a very intense 10-day period to have a discussion about a whole range of issues. It's an extraordinary range. There are almost 400 side events on issues around the environment, human rights, conflicts, climate change. You go down the list, it's all there. It's all part of the discussion. I think what the Secretary General was saying today was, look, we are in a very serious moment. We're in a very difficult time with the possibility of a global recession on top of all the other crises that we have been dealing with. And we simply have to make progress. And I think he's right. We do have to make progress. We have to find a way to get enough common ground that will allow us to stop the really serious downward slide in global security, on climate change, inequality issues, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. All these things go together, and it's really, really important for us to recognize that we have to make progress.
A lot of important conversations to keep our eyes on, Ambassador. Now, Russia's war with Ukraine is going to be a big part of discussions at the gathering. So what is Canada's stance at the General Assembly when it comes to this conflict in particular?
Well, we've been very clear from the outset that this is an unprovoked illegal attack being carried out by the Russians against Ukraine, that it is a war of aggression. Of that, there is absolutely no doubt. And that in carrying out that war, the Russians have been guilty of terrible, terrible atrocities. The knock-on effects, if you like, of this aggression have been really serious, not just for the people of eastern Ukraine, where most of the fighting has been taking place, but for all of Ukraine and then all of Eastern Europe. And then when it comes to food and export of food and the cost of living and the effect on energy security, for example, all of these critical questions, it's had a terrible cascading effect. And that's the one that we're dealing with now. And that's why I think thoughtful people are really very, very concerned about the likelihood of a global recession and what that recession will mean for debt levels, whether people go bankrupt or not, whether countries go bankrupt or not. And we have to understand that these are all possibilities now as a result of what the Russians have been doing.
Some very concerning possibilities, Ambassador Rae. Now, another important topic will be climate change. And Mr. Guterres said something interesting today. He's calling on developing nations to pay for loss and damage happening in poor nations who contribute little to climate change. Now, the question here is that a fair request for Canada in particular?
Well, I think all of the advanced economies are going to have to ask themselves the question. Once the science tells us that the unlimited pollution of the atmosphere with carbon emissions has a serious impact on the weather and on the climate, can we honestly say that we have had nothing to do with the losses and the damages which many countries have been experiencing as a result of what's taken place? So I don't think we can rule out the logic of what's being proposed. I think we can all argue about the numbers, about the affordability of it and how it's going to be done. But I've been very pleased that my government, the government of Canada, has not taken a position that says never, never, never. We will never discuss this. What we've tried to say is, okay, let's start to get real about what this means, because it's not a one-time payment. It's not like an insurance company paying out for one time. It's about dealing with the impact that these storms, these rising sea levels, the incredible impacts that are being experienced by a great many countries, many of them very, very vulnerable, even vulnerable to the survival of their country. We need to understand that there is a consequence to what's been taking place over the last 300 years. We need to understand that. There is a consequence to it.
Lots to keep our eyes on as this gathering unfolds. Ambassador Rae, thank you again for giving us your time today on Forum Daily.
Good to talk to you. It's a pleasure always. Thank you so much for inviting me on the program.
Thank you, Mr. Rae. We'll be right back.